I was muted. My apologies. Good morning and welcome to the September 16th, 2022 Sandag Transportation Committee. Before I move forward, I would like to ask our interpreter how to access interpretation for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I will begin with the instructions in Spanish and I will be back with the instructions in English. Muy buenos días. Se está ofreciendo interpretación simultánea. Si nos acompaña físicamente en la sala, por favor, diríjase a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. El receptor parece un pequeño iPod y se puede usar para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. Ahora, si nos acompaña vía Zoom, para hacer uso del servicio, desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla donde aparecen sus controles. Ahí verá un icono que parece un globito terráqueo y seleccionaría Spanish o español. Si está en la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., presionaría primero los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Good morning once again. Interpretation is being provided to and from Spanish. If you are joining us in person at Sandag and need interpretation into English, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. The headset looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece, which you can use to hear the meeting in English should there be comments in Spanish. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpreter will come on automatically. Now, if you are joining us via Zoom, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a toolbar where you will find an interpretation icon. It looks like a little world, and then you would select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, or other mobile device, you would first press more, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Gracias and thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Before we move forward, I'll first ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Very good. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll begin with item number 1, public comment, communications, and member comments. We'll now take public and member comments. Ms. Francesca, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Before we move on to item 1, would it be okay for us to take a roll call?
Absolutely. Let's do the roll.
Thank you. We'd like to do that for the benefit of those who are calling in, may not have a visual representation of the members here. So for North County Inland, Mayor Ritter is absent. Mayor Voss for North County Inland is also absent. For South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Here.
Mayor Salas for South County is absent. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Here.
Thank you. And Councilmember Von Wilpert is not present. For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas, Supervisor Lawson Reamer, and Supervisor Anderson are all absent. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza. Here. For East County, Mayor Minto.
Here.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Present.
For North County Coastal, Mayor Hall is not present. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno is absent. Councilmember Aguirre. Councilmember Aguirre is also absent. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Bhat Patel.
Here.
For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson and Councilmember Contreras are absent. The San Diego County Regional Airport Authority is absent. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Naranjo.
Here.
For the Port of San Diego, Vice Chairman Castellanos is not present. For our advisory members, for Caltrans, Director Delarda.
I'm here.
Ann Fox. Ann Fox is present. And Mario Orso is absent. For the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, Chairwoman Pinto and Chairman Hill are both absent. And that completes the roll call.
Thank you very much. Good job for East County being fully represented today. We'll now take public comments and member comments. Ms. Francesca, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one member of the public who would like to speak virtually. Catherine Rhodes, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I wanted to talk about your 2021 regional plan and EIR that was adopted on December 10th, 2021, and was finally approved 3 weeks ago by the State of California Air Resource Board, CARB, on August 26, 2022. After final state approval, Sandag was to take out the road user charge pilot project and come up with alternative funding methods. So far, no elected official or Sandag has come up with any alternative funding solutions for the road user charge that I have seen. Also in budget documents, I'm not sure if Sandag has shown the $350 million from the FAA passenger facility charge revenue from the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority to Sandag for the airport connectivity and transit projects. Since the $350 million in new revenue was announced in 2019, 3 years ago, so far $0 have been requested by Sandag staff or paid by the airport. The airport authority has never had the $300 million for transit or airport connectivity as an agenda item. The existing MOU already allows the airport to pay Sandag for the CEQA phase of the airport connectivity project, but they're not. But great news, great news. The whole entire solution to your road user charge is here. And it is what I talked about before, the January 12th, 2021 FAA memo regarding the updated passenger facility charge eligibility of on-airport rail access projects, which states that FAA policy is to make rail lines that do not exclusively serve the airport PFC eligible. The order currently states that airport ground projects must be for exclusive use. Now it is not. You can have non-exclusive use. So what this project could do, if you get this paid for by airport revenue, you could get billions of dollars that could offset your road user charge. But so far, you've never even analyzed it. I've never even seen anybody bring it up. So what I'm asking for you guys to do is actually put the January 12th, 2021 FAA passenger facility charge policy update for non-exclusive transit corridor and stations on your agenda, so you could actually discuss it. And then, of course, you would need the updated layout plan. And, you know, one of the things that that the airport said, that if you would get, you know, one of the things you're eligible to get is, this is a calculation. You calculate the cost to build a hypothetical standalone people mover system connecting the airport terminals to a regional transit system. That's your project. And the airport said that if this policy goes through, which it did, then it would have
Thank you, and my apologies, Catherine, your time has expired. We do have one additional public comment, Jason B. You can go ahead when you're ready, and Jason will be our final speaker.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm a resident of the East Village. I was calling to request that you adopt option 1 for the temporary Barrio Logan segment of the Bayshore Bikeway. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get from.
I'm so sorry. This comment period is actually for items that are not on the agenda. So if I
Sorry.
And make your comments during item 9, we'll have a specific comment period during that time. Chair, that is all the public comments for non-agenda.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to committee member comments. Councilmember Stankey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At a recent city council meeting in Coronado, council supported my initiative to have the TDA funding that Coronado receives and funds the morning commuter ferry, approximately $275,000 annually. Have that usage looked at. It's really, from my point of view, not having the impact on NASNY commuters that the community would hope. It also tends to service more Bayshore Bikeway users that probably should be funded by active transportation regional funding instead of from Coronado's TDA. Options presented to council in my initial presentation was continuing our shuttle year round, which is part of our climate action plan, or perhaps instituting a micro transit program in Coronado, both of which would be ideal for our community. Ultimately, Pronto should be accepted on the ferry system, and it's hoped that during the upcoming fare initiative that Brian Lane spoke to me earlier about, that accepting Pronto on the ferry be looked at seriously. And ultimately, even though I won't be here past December, Waterborne transportation should be a part of our regional transportation system, not a novelty. I'm really glad it's included in the RTP, and I look forward to continuing to be a champion for ferry service in San Diego, and more importantly, getting ferry service back to North Island Naval Air Station. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Do we have any other members of the committee? Yes, Mr. Dayarda.
Thank you, Vice Chair Campillo. Tomorrow is a very important day because it's Coastal Cleanup Day. So hundreds and thousands of volunteers will be spending their morning along our coast, picking up trash and making our beaches and our waterways cleaner. So Team Caltrans will be there in 3 locations at the San Elijo Lagoon, at Mission Bay, and in Chula Vista. I hope that you can all join us for some exercise and some great old cleaning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dayarda. I will be participating in that as well in my community, so I encourage everyone to show up in their community to help clean up. Any further comments from the committee? Seeing none, we will now move to item number 2, our agency reports. I believe Executive Director Ekrada will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair Campillo. Good morning to all of you. Good to see you in person, finally, 2.5 years in. My report today is going to take you a little bit back to 3 years ago when we established the agency's priority. We have 5 priorities. 1 is to complete Midcoast. 2 is to pass a vision for the future. That's the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan, and get it approved by state and federal governments. 3, to get Otay Mesa 2 to be delivered to San Diegans by 2024. 4, to look at the airport, the rail to the airport connection. 5, to put innovation into moving the track of the Bluff in the North County. So I've been here 3 years, 8 months, and 16 days. Who's counting, right? I am proud of this team here at Sandag. So let us review the priorities. We delivered the Midcoast on time budget for San Diegans to ride and enjoy. And CEO Sharon Coon is here to tell you that I believe the ridership is very promising for this line. I believe this will be one of the highest light rail ridership in the country. We should be proud of. Delivered on time, on budget last November, where 8,500 of San Diegans celebrated with me and Sharon and all of you. In December 10th, we passed the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan. This board did adopt the plan. Happy to report to you that as of 2 weeks ago, the plan has been approved by federal and state governments. Why is that significant? That is significant because money flows into this region only if this region has a plan that meets those requirements. And we're talking about billions of dollars, billions. Third priority was to complete Otay Mesa 2 by 2024. Now that's hard to do, as your chair will attest, not only dealing internally with our regulation, but dealing with another country, given that neither Sandag or Caltrans District 11 have the authority to talk in the name of the national government. Gustavo, my partner, and I been to Mexico many times, pre-COVID, after COVID, been to Washington, D.C. We never gave up. We hear the cynics saying this is not doable. Federal government is not ready. But 2 weeks ago, she chose it intentionally while I was away. You broke ground on Otay 2. This facility will be delivered. And last week, Caltrans District 11 and Sandag celebrated receiving the largest federal grant, infra grant, $150 million, the largest in the country. No other region in the United States of America came even close. The closest was $40 million. That is a test to Gustavo, his leadership, his staff, the partnership we have with Caltrans District 11. That's $150 million that we didn't have a few weeks back. That's going to go into building the facility. That's giving a message to the federal agencies we're working with that this is real, this is serious. In a few weeks, this board here in this room will hear about an agreement with Mexico, a binding agreement that we're going to bring to you. That's going to bind both sides of the border. Happy to report that the Mexican side is moving as fast, maybe faster. Gustavo, myself, and our Secretary of Transportation were in Mexico City this month or last month, and we were surprised with the progress they're making. I mean, this is hitting the highest level from the president all the way down. So we delivered this third priority to Santiago September 24. And congratulations to Gustavo, his team, the region, Sandag team for getting the largest infra grant allocation. And I want to mention specifically Mario Orso, Victoria Stackwick, who truly are amazing people who did the work to make it happen. The fourth priority was, as you know, in my 10-year here, short 10 years here, we had to slow the trains down several times because the bluff wasn't stable. We went to Sacramento and we worked hard and we got $110 million to stabilize it with our eye on moving the track off the bluff. Happy to report to you, you've seen an email from me. We received $300 million from the state budget. We're the envy of the rest of the state, that we got that allocation in the state budget that's going to start flowing as early as October, maybe December, to environmentally clear, design, and once and for all, remove the track of the bluff. On the airport connection, we've been working really hard, spending a lot, millions of dollars, to figure out what's the best way to get rail to the airport. All options still on the table, and that eventually is going to connect to a central mobility hub, a San Diego Grand Central. We're looking now at downtown as an option. It's probably preferred option, but we haven't picked the preferred project yet. That's going to be picked in a month. We'll be here in front of you. Connecting to the airport is going to look at all kinds of things, technology, convenience. We have many options, the trolley to the airport, and newer technologies, people mover technologies that goes every 2 to 3 minutes to the airport. But they all have to connect to a central mobility hub because we want to guarantee every San Diegans one transfer from wherever they are, whether it's North Coastal, North Inland, East, South, one transfer to the airport. That's the goal. And yes, people say it's expensive, it's going to take a long time. Both are true. But I ask you, is there anything in history that worth anything that didn't cost a lot of money and took a lot of time? That's what people said about Automated 2 14, 15 years ago, when our predecessors, and I'm grateful to them, and this agency at District 11 said, let us do it. A lot of people said, well, it's not going to happen. It's happening. These major infrastructure projects take time. Last month, or November, actually, we released what we call request for information concept. We asked the private sector to tell us ideas for innovation. We received 18 bids, which was really surprising. We didn't think we'll get that many. 3 of them were chosen to move forward, where we at Sandag partner with them to develop this technology. One idea worth mentioning came from a company based in LA, is extending the trolley 1 mile into Tijuana with the most innovative ways possible. Let us work and take that seriously. Let us connect Baja California and California. Tragically, we lost some people riding bikes in San Diego. Let us re-emphasize our commitment to Vision Zero. Let us not forget that this has to be at the top of the line. We should not build active transportation infrastructure that pretty much lead to people dying or getting injured. This board heard from the sister of the person who was killed in Balboa Park. It was very moving. Let us remember that testimony of a sister who is grieving for her brother. Let's not do that again. Together with the leadership of this gentleman to my right and the city of San Diego, Mayor Gloria, and others in the region, let us commit to Vision Zero, and this agency will do what it takes. You're going to hear a lot about what we call the Purple Line. Maria here will tell you that she talked about it for 40-some years. let us bring this to be the next mid-coast of San Diego. We're working right now on the San Ysidro with Caltrans District 11 Mobility Hub. Let us make sure we get the study money for the Purple Line, the environmental money for the Purple Line, and not forget that the Blue Line has to be reconfigured. A trip from the border here to downtown should not take an hour, should take 20 minutes. And with some grade crossings, little improvement, we can do that. Let me just say, the reason I review these priorities, you might hear some speeches and some news outlet talking about this agency. And this agency, and I've been in this business for 30 years, has the most talented group of people you can imagine. For those who want to give speeches and go after me, I'm a fair game. But to go after the staff, that is not. That's a red line. These staff, just in the last few months, brought almost $500 million, competing with other good people around the country. So sort through these speeches in KUSI and others. This agency stands for what's right, stands for the truth. Yes, we have areas we need to improve. Yes, we have areas we need to put controls and policies. We'll do that. But this agency stands on the merits of what it does and the things that deliver for the region. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ekrada. Excellently said. 5 for 5 on our priorities. Very well done. Originally, it was going to be Colleen Clementson who was going to present. I'll notice that you also had the groundbreaking while I was out of town as well, but that's okay.
That was not intentional.
I know that wasn't intentional. My staff was there and they were very grateful to be included. All right. Ms. Webb, do we have any public comment on the agency reports?
We do not have any public comments.
Understood. We will now move to items number 3 through 6, consent agenda. Is there any public comment or questions on these items at this moment? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent. I have Councilmember Sankey. Do we have a second?
Zito seconds.
We have a second from Councilmember Zito. All right, we'll use our electronic voting system.
I just wanted to note for the record before we vote that there were no public comments on any consent items either.
Very good. Thank you.
Did the council member another?
That is her. Is that yours?
This is North County Inland.
Oh, okay.
That item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Thank you so much, Ms. Webb. We'll now move on to item number 7, the Bayshore Bikeway to Barrio Logan segment, an update on the bike rider accommodation through construction. We have Ms. Dinara Usenova to begin the presentation. Ms. Usenova, please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. I'm Chris Kluth, the Active Transportation Program Manager. I'm going to kick off the item and then hand it over to Dinara to cover the bulk of the presentation, and then at the end come back with a little information and discussion on how this effort kind of fits into our overall active transportation and bike plan implementation program. So, we are here, let's see if I can get these right, to come back to you in response to some comments and questions that came up at the July Transportation Committee meeting. And, these projects for us are all about accessibility, mobility, and also obviously safety. And that's a big part of why we're implementing these projects to achieve those 3 goals. So you'll see in the presentation, we actually put together a 4th option that shows the ability to go out a little bit out of direction for the entire length of the corridor. We just wanted to be complete and put every option on the table, and kind of be transparent about that. We kind of hint at that in the report, but we thought we would make that more clear. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And so, as I mentioned, Dinara is here. She's the project manager for Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan. And with that, Dinara, let me let you cover the rest of that.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. I will begin my presentation this morning with a brief overview of the project and its current status. After that, I will present the 4 conceptual options to implement temporary bike lanes during construction and associated costs with those 4 options. Then I will cover key constraints and considerations with those 4 options, and we will have time for questions at the end. The Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan segment is a new 2.5-mile segment of bikeway that will extend along Harbor Drive from Park Boulevard to 32nd Street. This project will complete a vital connection in the Bayshore Bikeway through the Barrio Logan neighborhood between downtown San Diego and National City. Once complete, this transformational project will improve safety for people biking, rolling, walking, and driving along Harbor Drive. On this slide, you can see a rendering of the project as planned and how it is expected to look upon completion. Full project completion is estimated in the year 2025. By closing a critical gap in the regional bike network, the Barrio Logan segment of the Bayshore Bikeway will create a safe, active transportation option for people traveling to important community and regional destinations. This is another rendering of the planned project at completion. The bikeway will be a 2-way multi-use path, also known as Class 1 bike lane, meaning it will be completely separated from the vehicle travel lanes as shown on the simulation slide by barriers. From Park Boulevard to Cesar Chavez Parkway, the project will travel along west side of Harbor Drive, also known as Bayside. And then at Cesar Chavez Parkway, it will switch sides of the road and continue traveling on east side of Harbor Drive, all the way to 32nd Street and until where it will connect to an existing Class 2 bike lane. The map and image on this slide highlight the current condition of the project, which includes an alternative bike route around the active construction area of the project between Cesar Chavez Parkway and 28th Street. This alternative route was implemented in July of this year and offers a detour options for people biking near the section of the project. The project team installed traffic control signage like the ones you see on the slide to the right to guide bike riders to an alternative route. We're also implementing a more robust and proactive outreach and communication strategy to work with key stakeholders to spread the word about the alternative routes and timing. Now I will discuss the potential temporary bikeway options that the project team developed. We have 4 conceptual exhibits that show different options for people biking to get around and through the active construction areas of the project. These exhibits are conceptual while the project team continues to develop and analyze the feasibility of each option. Locations of separate bike lanes would switch with different phases of construction. Before we dive into the details, I want to take an opportunity to discuss the 2 traffic control measures that I will be discussing. The first of these is K-Rail. These are concrete barriers, the ones that you see on the left side of the slide. The second are delineators, also known as flexible posts or flexible bollards, and you can see the image of that on the right of the slide. I'll be referencing K-Rail and delineators as I discuss the 4 potential temporary bikeway options. Here you can see the exhibit illustrating option 1. The map legend highlights the meaning of different colored line segments. For example, the orange line represents the limits of the project. The dark blue line surrounding the orange represents delineators or K-rail barriers depending on construction phase and activity. The blue line represents a detour. Each of the 4 options is broken down into 3 segments: the northern segment, the middle segment, and southern segment. The northern segment, located between Park Boulevard and Cesar Chavez Parkway, is the only segment that varies between the first 3 options. The middle section remains the same across all 4 options and includes the alternative bike route detour that is already in place between Cesar Chavez Parkway and 28th Street. The southern section, located between 28th Street and 32nd Street, also remains the same across the first 3 options. For the southern segment, delineators would be used to create temporary separate bike lanes between 28th Street and Bell Street to accommodate wide loads traveling to and from 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. Between Bell Street and 32nd Street, K-rail barriers would be used to separate the temporary separated bikeways. For the northern segment in option 1, delineators would be used to create temporary separated bike lanes during the median phase of Harbor Drive construction. Then the K-rail barriers would be used to separate the bike lanes when the work shifts to the shoulders of Harbor Drive. The cost to implement option number 1 is estimated at $1.2 million. For the northern segment in option 2, delineators would be used to separate the temporary bike lanes during construction of the median work of Harbor Drive, just like in option 1. When construction work shifts to the shoulders of Harbor Drive, people biking southbound would be directed to the alternative route shown in blue. Northbound riders would have a delineator separated bikeway. The cost to implement option number 2 is estimated at $820,000. For the northern segment in option 3, all bike riders would be directed to alternative bike route shown in blue for both the median and the shoulders phases of Harbor Drive. The cost to implement option number 3 is estimated at $670,000. The final option, option number 4, is the option that offers riders alternative detour in all 3 segments. For the northern segment, from Park Boulevard to Cesar Chavez Parkway. For the middle segment, that's currently in place from Cesar Chavez Parkway to 28th Street, and then from 28th Street all the way to the 8th Street in National City, which is a bit outside of project limit. This option is estimated at $250,000. This slide highlights the estimated cost across the 4 options. Option number 1 would use delineators and K-rails during different construction phases of Harbor Drive and is estimated at $1.2 million. Option number 2 would use delineators with no K-rail and an alternative detour route in the northern segment and is estimated at $820,000. Option number 3, which proposes an alternative route detour in the northern segment, is estimated at $670,000. And final option number 4, which would provide a detour throughout the entire project limit and even beyond, is estimated at $250,000. Several issues need to be considered for the potential implementation of any of the options. For example, right-of-way constraints, many street intersections with adjacent railroad crossings and high peak traffic volumes, coordination with large organizations such as Naval Base San Diego near 32nd Street, NASCO near 28th Street, Port of San Diego, BNSF, and the community. Oversized delivery loads from the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal to the shipyards should also be considered. Insufficient project contingency to fund change order for a desired option is another consideration. And of course, there are 24 construction phases with updated traffic control plans that would need to be reviewed and approved by both City of San Diego and MTS. And then there could be potential impacts to the schedule while doing the change orders. and I'm gonna let Chris handle from here. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dinara. A couple other things to consider as you enter the discussion on how to proceed, and we want to take your input and get the ideas from the Transportation Committee and any of our stakeholders or public who may be speaking today. So we wanted to put all the options on the table, as I mentioned before, so we could consider how we move forward in the context of our overall program. We have 6 projects coming online, going out to bid within the next 18 months. And we know that bids and costs for materials and work have been going up. So we want to be very careful about how we proceed in our program and look at the costs versus the trade-offs to the full extent possible without compromising the safety of people going through or around our projects. So as we look out to the future projects, at the very least, we're already considering how to look at all of those projects and provide the enhanced signage and the focused proactive outreach, making sure we have specific outreach to the stakeholders, the advocates, and any of the stakeholders within the project area specific to the issue of traffic control and how to get around on your bike or when you're walking while the project is under construction. So we've done that in the past, but I think we know that we can have additional benefits by putting more effort into that part of our outreach. And then also, as we look at each project, we want to assess the feasibility of alternate routes within the project corridor. Again, balancing where we think we can provide a viable alternative versus where we think we may need to provide additional separated bikeway or facilities within the construction area as we proceed. So as we lead into the discussion, I just wanted to add that extra bit of context as we're thinking about our entire program. Go ahead. So today, the Transportation Committee is asked to review the options for the temporary bikeways during construction and provide feedback to staff. And with that, we're here to answer any questions and take your feedback.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Ms. Webb. We'll begin with public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have several public comments. Hands are still going up. I see 3 at the moment. We'll start with Nicole Burgess. The person after Nicole Burgess, the name I see is San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your name is, but you're up next. Nicole, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Sandag, for the presentation, Chris, Dinara, and your whole team for looking at alternatives to create safer pathways while construction is being done, and super appreciative of that. I wish I would have heard a little more information of the detour down Main Street, and what does that look like? Is that actually putting flex post delineators along city streets to provide that safe infrastructure, or is it just a safe detour along what is already existing? And I ask because when we look at like costs that are going to be towards this project, if we can actually create a detour that's actually part of what city plans are already looking to do. We have some class 4 recommendations for Main Street already in the community, Barrio Logan community plan. And just, looking at, okay, are these treatments, could they actually be permanent one day along those corridors? But it is also a tough trade-off because I know that sometimes direct connections are super important. So the south and north connections, when you're on Harbor and you miss that detour, you want to have that safe facilities. So how we provide delineators and protection on Harbor Drive is still a concern. So I guess I'm just looking for more information of what really is going to be done on that alternative D, and perhaps working with the city to really improve that for a long-term fix. With a final note, I thought it was fantastic to see in the Netherlands, their temporary bikeway is a bridge that looks better than almost any of our infrastructure that we do permanent. So temporary bikeway can go a long way, and I hope we can consider that when we're using our money wisely. Thank you for allowing me to make the comments, and really thank you for providing a safe access and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is San Diego County Bicycle Coalition, who will be followed by Andy Hanshaw.
Hi, and good morning, committee members. This is Will Radigan speaking on behalf of the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. First, I want to thank SANDAG staff for paying attention to this major safety issue and taking the time to develop these solutions. I also want to thank Councilmembers Campillo and Elo Rivera and Supervisor Vargas for elevating this problem at the last Transportation Committee meeting. There was a time very recently when bicycle safety during construction projects was an afterthought, and we're deeply appreciative that that is no longer the case. Temporary safety improvements on Harbor Drive are truly a life or death issue, and we urge you to select the safest option, which is option 1. Between 2014 and 2021, 4 people were seriously injured or killed while biking or walking along the Barrio Logan section of Harbor Drive. Then on June 21st this year, just 2 weeks after the Bayshore Bikeway groundbreaking, Donald Eichner was struck and killed by a driver while riding his bike on this road. Without these temporary safety improvements, it is likely that we will see another life-changing injury or death for the end of construction. With that said, we strongly believe that option 1 and only option 1 is sufficient to solve the safety issues on Harbor Drive. For cyclists to actually use a diversion, it must be relatively direct and comfortable. The Main Street diversion is relatively direct and comfortable. The diversion proposed between Cesar Chavez Parkway and Park Boulevard is not direct, and we do not expect that most cyclists would use it. That would leave most cyclists still using Harbor Drive in this section, where there would be no separated bikeway. This would put them in the exact same scenario in which Donald Eichner was killed, and that is unacceptable. While option 1 is expensive, we believe there is no dollar amount that can be placed on a human life, and we hope you'll prioritize safety. Thank you again for all of your hard work on this issue, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Andy Hanshaw, who will be followed by Corinna Contreras. Andy, you are self-muted at the moment, so you can begin when you're ready.
There it is. Thank you. Andy Hanshaw, Executive Director with the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. I too want to add my thanks to SANDAG and staff for bringing these options forward. And I want to thank Hassan for his comments earlier, dedicating their commitment to no more deaths, Vision Zero, and active transportation in the safest possible manner we can make it. So I want to support what my colleague Will was talking about earlier for option 1 as the safest and most direct and most accessible option for this temporary project. And I do think it's critical to have a temporary project, as we heard that the completion of the full project is not anticipated until 2025. So it's quite a bit of time before we get there. And I think a temporary measure is critical to provide the safest bike facility we can make in the interim. We can point to a really good SANDAG example on Pershing, where a temporary facility was built while the permanent project is being built with the K-rail, and it's proven to be effective in keeping that corridor safe throughout the construction period. So just want to say thanks again. I do think and support option 1 as the way to go here, and we at the coalition are happy to help any way we can, as always, by spreading the word and and sharing whatever we can to assist in this project. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Corinna Contreras. Corinna, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. My name is Karina Contreras. I am calling in my capacity as transportation policy advocate for Climate Action Campaign. And I too want to thank everybody who is involved bringing forward a solution that's going to protect individuals. It's great to hear that there's a real commitment to Vision Zero. And with a real commitment to Vision Zero means that we need physical barriers for those who are cycling. So option one is the best option. In this time of creating this class one bikeway, which is an incredible project, we want to ensure that the shortest distance that is safe and protected for cyclists is the option that we go with. There's already so little money contributed to active transportation programming in San Diego County that, $1.2 million is a drop in the bucket for real safety. There's nothing like a K-rail that is going to provide a real barrier to ensure that people are safe. So I speak in favor of option one, and I hope that's the option that you all decide to go with. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Chair. That concludes the public speakers.
Thank you very much. I'll kick us off at this. I would really like to start by thanking the Sandag staff for hearing the safety concerns and the call to action from me, from Supervisor Vargas and Council President Elo Rivera to address the safety needs along the Bayshore Bikeway during construction. I'd also like to thank Reyes Construction Incorporated for working with Sandag to bring some proposals before us today in this item. Immediate action needs to be taken to improve the safety for bicyclists and pedestrians along Harbor Drive prior to the overall completion and construction of this project. In 2021, 17 bicyclists were fatally injured in San Diego, and 3 serious injuries and 2 fatalities of bicyclists and pedestrians have occurred along the Barrio Logan segment of Harbor Drive that we know about. In June, a 63-year-old bicyclist died after he was clipped by a moving vehicle near the intersection of Harbor Drive and Beardsley Street. We are asking San Diegans to use alternate forms of transportation moving into the future, but we fall short in providing them with the necessary infrastructure that allows them to do so safely. Of course, 2 years is a very, very long time to wait for safe bicycle infrastructure. I believe that action needs to be taken in the interim while the Bayshore Bicycle Way is being built to protect our cyclists and our pedestrians on this heavily trafficked road. I understand there are additional costs, and of course they are significant, but we need to take measures like options one to protect the lives of the folks who are doing their responsible duty to try to change our mode share in our county. So the protecting lives is more important to me than the mere $400,000 increase from option 2 to option 1. I know we're not voting today, as the agenda says on this item, but discussion and input are called for. So therefore, I'd like to express my strong support for option 1 and would like to see staff move forward with these concepts to protect bicyclists and pedestrians on this roadway. I'll now turn it over to other committee members. Yes, Ms. Cooney.
Yeah, would it be helpful if we have the conversation while we have the option 1 slide up? The alternative?
Yes, can the slides go back on the screen?
For option 1. So option 1 obviously would be going on Main Street. I just want to make sure that it wouldn't impede the continual use for the 929 bus service along Main Street. So I just wanted to understand, are you talking about curb or construction of barriers along Main Street?
No, the blue lines that have the alternative routes are mostly what's existing out there now with additional signage. So it's a shared facility. There's no permanent installation of any barriers or anything.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, great question. Any further comments? Yes, Councilmember Zito.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Vice Chair, and the people that spoke. For me, it's a little bit challenging to provide feedback without a little bit more information. I don't know, for example, if staff has any ideas how much longer this project will be going on if option one is pursued, because there was information in the staff report that indicated that this would likely impact schedule and that this would likely potentially delay things and also create budgetary and issues as well that may have to get resolved. And then I just want to bring that up because, you know, clearly we have a dangerous situation, and the longer construction takes, the longer we have a dangerous situation, even if we have protected bicycle facilities. You know, I give the example in Solana Beach. We've had the unfortunate reality in the past year and a half, we've had 2 deaths on 101 in Solana Beach with bicycles, and that is a street that has a Class 1 facility on it. And it's just because not everybody chooses to use protected bicycle facilities, and that can happen here too, even if we provide them. And so the longer this goes, if this is going to be a significant schedule impact and create and exacerbate a more dangerous situation, I'd have concern pursuing that as opposed to trying to get something done quickly and provide viable alternative routes. I would also have a question about, you know, the alternative routes that are proposed. I had a difficult time determining what bicycle facilities will exist on those routes and how well they will be able to protect the bicycling population. I mean, I'm going to be inclined to advocate for what the people that know this area well. I know bicycling well. I did bicycle here today from Solana Beach, and I do it on a regular basis, and I will be bicycling home. So it's something and you know, from my perspective, the route I took here today, I actually take an extra 1.5 miles to get here because I want to be safe. And frankly, bicycling by the airport all the time is not always safe. And there's other ways that I've found to do that are safer. So I am willing to take a detour, and I am willing to go a little bit out of my way to feel a little bit more safe if there are viable routes that can actually make me do that. So I can't strongly advocate for anything because I don't feel like I have enough information. But if we can do, you know, a safe approach that doesn't severely impact the schedule, I'd be inclined to go that way. But if the alternative routes are also safe and it will keep us getting this thing done as fast as possible, I'd be inclined to advocate for that myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. I was told you took the chopper to work today. No helicopter. Okay. Any further comments? Oh, yes, we'll start with Councilmember Mendoza and then Councilmember Sankey.
So some of my questions I think have been answered, but I just want to make sure. So this is a 2.5 mile segment, and how long we're anticipating it's going to take to finish this segment? Did I hear 2 years?
It's about 2 years, yes.
Okay. And the first speaker, I think it was, or the comment was Nicole Burgess, and she brought up an interesting point, and that it's that if we're spending all this money on a temporary bypass, could we make it those improvements? I think what she was saying is, could we make those improvements permanent if we're spending all this money? Because you know, sometimes I like to bike as well, probably not as much as this guy next to me, but I do bike from Lemon Grove to downtown. It's a much easier ride than you have. But sometimes I'm riding my bike because I'm in a hurry. You know, I need to get somewhere by a certain time. And other times I'm just bike riding, you know, because it's a beautiful day and I feel like riding my bike. And then I wouldn't necessarily want to be on the busiest street, but might want to be over on a quieter street like Main Street if it was protected. And then I thought that Sharon brought up a good point too. If there's a bus route on Main Street, is that the best street to reroute people to? Years ago, I would ride from, I lived in Rolando, and so I would ride all the way down University Avenue to downtown San Diego, which is a very active bus route, and I'd you know, be dodging the bus the whole way, and that's really not the most. I think a bus route isn't the most ideal route to divert bicycles to. So, I think I would be in favor of option one also, but maybe we could take some of these other things into consideration.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Sankey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having driven this area on my bike couple times before this project came forward. I know the need for it is there. I'm disappointed that it's going to be 2 years, but understanding the complexities of bringing the bike lanes past the shipyards and bringing the bike lanes along Harbor Drive, I understand that it's going to take a while. I'm going to work my way backwards through the options. National Avenue is just not in condition to be ridden by bicycles, frankly, on a major way. So option 4, option 2 and 3, which include National Avenue, are non-starters for me. It is also a bus route, and you'll be surprised that there's an awful lot of roads that have bus routes on them. But I think the Main Street option makes the most sense, and it's the one that's clearly in all the options for us today. Option 4, as was mentioned by one of the public speakers, is way out of the way, and the folks that use these bike lanes are going to not use them if the route doesn't meet their needs. I'm left with option 1, sadly, as the most expensive, but it is also the safest presented to us today. I think the main thing here, as was clearly pointed out by Vice Chair Campillo, is that our number one decision has to be safety, and it costs us extra money to keep this safe during this project, because that's the whole reason we're doing the project to begin with. Then we have to step up and do the project that is the most safest way for folks to transit this area during construction for this bicycle project that is absolutely dedicated to a safer route for the Bayshore Bikeway. So given what I know now from the discussion, both the public and what's been presented today, option 1 seems to be the only one that I would be able to support if in fact we were asking for a motion today. There was a slide with 10 or 12 different bullet items on it that had several discussion points, considerations, exactly, and I know staff's going to look at those very carefully. I'm sure MTS is going to be very involved in making sure that whatever decision gets made is still working within our transit system. So, and the other stakeholders will certainly have their thing to say, but I concur with what seems to be the consensus, both from the public speakers and several folks who've spoken this morning, that 1 is the way to go. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Mayor Minto.
It just kind of ironic. I just did that Bike the Bay fundraiser a couple weeks ago, and we used a lot of this route, including the detour for Bike the Bay. And I can't help but to think when I was on that part of Harbor and they took us off of Harbor, and I went, why would they do this? This is just doesn't make sense to get off of Harbor, which is a straight street. And, you know, I do a lot of biking also. And as much as I hate to spend money, I'll make that clear. I hate to spend money, especially when it's other people's, well, maybe not other people's money, but not taxpayers' money. And so number 1 seems to be the most logical, and that would be my input, and my input coming from East County. The only thing I like to leave you with as a thought is, it's great, you know, that David, you can get from North County all the way down here, but it's very difficult to get from East County, especially where I live, downtown. I mean, there's not a lot of safe routes. We can go over the 52, get off on Santa Road, and then it's like a maze to get downtown or anywhere else in Kearney Mesa or otherwise, and on streets that don't have protected bike lanes. So I think in the future, we ought to think about, expanding out from there instead of just downtown San Diego, because in East County, for instance, we're lucky we get painted lines. So there is no separation. And if you go out Greenfield Drive, let's say even Lake Jennings Road, you know, you can almost take your life in your hands. So we need to be, you know, this is a great start, but it's not enough, doesn't go far enough. And I personally would like to see more design of other places, making a better, longer, safer, I guess, commute for people. Because David, I think you might have said they're talking about getting people, you know, on alternative transportation, or somebody said that. And quite frankly, it doesn't go far enough to help out. And I can tell you right now, in Santee, in the last 18 months, we've sold over 700 e-bikes. So I can tell you, East County is competing with other places. And I'd like to have more discussion about actually safe bicycling at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As a native of East County, absolutely agree with you and would love to see those connections. And as the city council district in San Diego that is buttressing neighbors with the city of Santee, you'd have my support in that as well. Yes, Councilmember Bhat Patel.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree with all of the board members that spoken today. The option number one seems to make the most sense with regards to Vision Zero being the most direct and the most protected option. As someone who used to cycle avidly as a young person and also now just purchased one, we declared an emergency in the city of Carlsbad, and just to understand a little bit better in terms of the approach as a cyclist, I wanted to be able to really understand how safety does matter and how just routes in general and the way that municipalities create routes would affect folks that are cycling throughout our jurisdiction. So from this perspective, just hearing from folks that are avidly cycling, and of course, obviously we would not want to put any sort of cost on a human life. I think that's definitely a point well taken. I would definitely agree with that particular option. The one question that I'd be curious to hear, because I'm sure there are folks out in the audience that are interested to hear the answer to this as well, is just why there's such a huge cost differential from the different options. If you look at option one, it's 1.2, and then you get down to option 4, and I think it was a little over 500,000. So just curious on that particular regard. And then I just also wanted to echo the sentiments that Councilmember Zito mentioned with regards to the schedule impacts and ensuring that there won't be too many interruptions to the schedules with regards to the actual project being completed. That's it. Thank you. And if somebody could answer my question, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I'll take a shot at that. So the cost differential, largest part of it comes down to obtaining the K-rail is not cheap, and moving it around is not cheap. So the more K-rail you have, the cost ratchets up pretty quick. Of course, that's the hardest barrier. So there is the greatest benefit from that. But that's really, that's the bulk of the cost differential between the two, and the amount of K-rail you have really is kind of what it boils down to. So the schedule, so we've already taken the liberty of contacting the city of San Diego and working with our contacts there to let them know that this may be coming and what can we do to work together to speed up the review of these. These are going to be brand new traffic control plans. So one will have to, our consultants have already gone a pretty long way in developing them to develop these. And there's more detail that we didn't show because it's just kind of hard to show on the screen. But developing these options to see what's viable and to give you the information to have this conversation. So we'll need to finish those in earnest and then submit those to the city of San Diego. And I think we have a commitment at this point from the city of San Diego to work with us to make sure to the best of our ability, all of our team's ability, to get those through the process as quickly as possible. So we can't guarantee that there won't be any impact to the overall schedule right now, but we're certainly working to minimize it or eliminate it if possible. I don't know if there was a third part of your question. Okay.
And just to add to that is that we have, as I mentioned before, we have 24 traffic control stages. So the stages vary. For example, phase 8 starts on October 1st, and then it would end sometime in November, and then you have phase 9. So it wouldn't be one phase as in Pershing case for the entire project duration. That's why we would have to work concurrently with the City of San Diego. We're really hoping they were gonna partner with us as well as MTS to expedite the permitting and approval process. And then we would have to negotiate with our contractor, Reyes Construction, because currently this was not part of the current bid, and negotiations, we could not possibly anticipate by how much the schedule would be impacted until after change order is implemented and negotiations are done.
Thank you for the great question. Any further comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation and your hard work on this and for taking in the feedback that we've provided today. And thank you to the public for calling in and on this particular item. We will now be moving on to, I believe this is item 8. Yes, item 8, the 2019 San Diego Regional Transportation Study. And we have a presentation ready to go. I'll allow staff to take a moment. Ms. Coachman, thank you for being here today to present on this item. It is an information item. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. Almost exactly 10 years ago, Uber launched its inaugural ride in San Diego with Tony Hawk as first passenger. At the time, Uber was using excess car service, town car service, to provide easily accessible rides to average people through an on-demand app. About 6 months later, the California Public Utilities Commission filed a rulemaking to regulate what they were calling new online-enabled transportation services, which we now call transportation network companies, or TNCs. The mass adoption was unprecedented. It also, how quickly ridership increased with Uber, Lyft, and other TNC rides presented both opportunities and challenges. The ability to get a ride so quickly is convenient, and the ease of hailing a ride using an app increases access to these forms of on-demand transportation. People without access to a vehicle who may normally take transit can use TNCs for unplanned trips or when transit isn't a good option for a particular trip. But quickly we saw challenges as well. They contribute to congestion, particularly in downtown areas. There's lots of safety concerns as well with the amount of demand they're placing on the curb. And again, our downtown areas where there's the most congestion and competition for that curb space. They also contribute to increases in vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. A survey by the state of California found that about 40% of the miles driven by TNC vehicles while they're in service have no passengers in the vehicle. We call that deadheading. This results in more vehicles traveled and more greenhouse gas emissions to accomplish the same amount of trips. SANDAG completes a travel behavior survey typically every 10 years to understand how people make travel choices. And this data is then used to update our computer model that we use for our regional plan and other planning efforts. So while we do this survey typically every 10 years, the last one we did in 2016, we noticed that travel behaviors were changing really rapidly at that time. We had the massive growth in TNC trips, and then we also had the introduction of new forms of transportation like scooters and the shared bicycles. And SANDAG was doing ongoing coordination with our other metropolitan planning organizations like we do around the state, so our partners in the Bay Area, LA, and Sacramento. And we really identified the need to do an interim survey so that we could better understand the travel behaviors for transportation network companies. And so ultimately, SANDAG partnered with SCAG in Southern California and MTC, our counterpart in the Bay Area. And we were successfully awarded a grant for almost $1 million through Caltrans to conduct this planning study. SANDAG sent out invitations randomly to households throughout the county and asked them to voluntarily participate in the survey. Ultimately, we had 2,400 participants in the study, and we collected data from these participants in the middle of 2019. Subsequently, we cleaned and weighted the data and processed it so that it was a representative sample of our region's population. So how we conducted the survey. People who volunteered to participate in the survey were prompted to download an app. Once they downloaded the app, they did an initial intake survey that asked them about, who lived in their house, how many cars they had, some basic data. And then from there, they would go about their daily lives. And when they completed a trip, a screen would pop up that noted the origin and destination and the route that they took to complete that app. And then they were prompted to complete a survey that asked a number of questions, such as how they took the trip, who they were traveling, where they were going, and why. There was also a survey at the end of each day that asked if they received any packages that day, if they had ordered anything online or gotten meal delivery, and also asked other discrete questions like questions about their demographics or their travel preferences, among others. So we got a lot of robust data. And what did we find? I want to highlight a couple of the most interesting findings. So while over half of San Diegans considered themselves regular TNC users, only about less than actually 1% total of the trips that happen in the region are taken by TNCs. This isn't really that surprising. I consider myself a regular TNC user, but even if I'm using a TNC service once a week, it's really a small percentage of the total trips that I'm taking. When are people using TNCs? I think also unsurprisingly by what we observed, the majority of trips are happening on the weekends. We see a lot on Friday, Saturday, and then also on Sunday. And then during the week, there's really a peak period during the 6 p.m. hour that people are using TNCs. So with trip demand concentrated in such small periods, this really creates, and they're also, as I mentioned earlier, competing for limited curb space. This really kind of informs ideas about how we could better manage curb space when it's an issue, having different demands throughout the day. So we also asked why people were using, why people were using TNCs. And nearly half during the week of people reported that they were going home. So that represents the second half of a round trip. But on the weekend, you see that's a lower percentage. So that means people are doing more trip chaining on the weekends, going from, a couple destinations before they return back home. Social and recreational trips represented a large percentage of the trips. And then on weekends, you saw a lot more people were using TNCs to complete errands than they did during the week. A couple of other key findings that we can use to inform our planning and policy discussions. When looking at the demographics of TNC users, they tend to be younger and also are more likely to earn less than the median income of the region. In fact, 42% of trips are being made by people whose household income is less than $50,000 annually. It's not a cheap service in general, so better understanding how these services are being used by low-income populations could inform programs geared towards improving transportation equity. Riders were also asked through the survey if TNC services weren't available, how would they have taken that trip? They had the option to check more than one box in that one, so the total adds up to more than 100%. But 63% responded that they would have considered taking a taxi, 30% would have used transit, and 20% indicated they would have considered riding their bike or walking. So with the taxi industry, Sandag's been having preliminary discussions around pilot ideas and are really excited about some of the ideas that they have that could help, their industry continue to thrive. And then when looking at the trip replacement that's happening with walking, biking, and transit, we could explore using fees, incentives, and gamification to encourage individuals to select more sustainable modes like transit, walking, and biking, and then also promoting the pooled TNC service option. And so the pooled TNC service is something that was available pre-pandemic and then just came back again recently, reintroduced by Uber and Lyft. And so you can click an option that allows you to say it's okay to pick up another passenger along the ride. If there is somebody along your route, then the TNC will get them and route accordingly. Another finding was we found that San Diegans were not using TNCs to connect to and from transit. In fact, less than 1% of the TNC trips that we recorded were being used to access transit services. NCTD recently conducted a pilot to subsidize rides that were serving the Sorrento Valley Station. And so, there's an example of ways that you can incentivize TNCs as a first last mile option, or also exploring integrating trip planning and payment options into a single app would be another way that we could explore promoting that type of connection. And then finally, we found that TNC pooled services that I just talked about were being pretty much underutilized. In fact, only 42% of the trips where the passenger selected the pooled option was there actually more than one passenger. And we found that in the regular service where people aren't selecting the pooled trip, it was about 3 out of 4 of those, there was more than one passenger. That's because typically, you know, if you're going to the airport with your family, you'll have more than one passenger. But, you know, working with the TNCs to figure out ways that they could improve their algorithms to better consolidate the pooled trips could really help benefit our climate goals. So how can we use this? I talked about most of this stuff in the previous slides, but you know, as we look at this data, it can really help us inform how we can select locations as we begin to explore curb management. And so where the most conflicts at the curb, we can look back at this data and understand where TNC specifically have the most demand for curb space, and where management of the curb space and other safe street improvements could really help reduce those conflicts. Also, we can look at, you know, the development of different pilots and how we could better improve the equity in underserved communities, which I talked about earlier as well, and then expanding on the different types of use cases. We talked about the first and last mile options. Also, you know, looking at ways that we can discourage the less sustainable trip replacement services. And finally, looking at ways that we can encourage the pooling option and using the different forms of incentives, fees, and gamification to increase sustainable choices by users. So that concludes my report. There we go. And I can take questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Well, Ms. Cooney, we're going to come to you as soon as we conclude public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a few public comments virtually. We'll start with Vera Kovanskaya, who will be followed by Catherine Rhodes. Vera, you can go ahead.
Hello, this is Vera Kovanskaya. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at UC San Diego Design Lab, and I wanted to congratulate Sandag on sharing this research. I think it's especially important now in light of recent news that TNC companies like Uber have been financially incentivizing media-friendly research on TNCs, that we have and continue to have publicly funded unbiased research on the impacts of TNCs on both riders and drivers in our community. This report is also exciting to read because it confirms many of our insights that we too have been seeing in our research about the limits of TNCs as a solution to San Diego's transportation needs. This is work that we've done based on synthesizing independent studies done in other cities, where we found that TNCs fall short on meeting climate and equity goals by negatively impacting road congestion, air quality, and disability access. So to the latter point about TNCs and disabilities access, I think it's important to note that in some other cities, there are currently pilot programs for TNCs to transport wheelchair users, and those pilot programs currently rely on volunteer drivers to invest in their own wheelchair accessible vehicles. And also, it's important to note here that TNC companies can't legally require their drivers to assist disabled passengers or to obtain larger vehicles to fit the range of wheelchairs that people use. In contrast, we know that taxi regulators can create policies that incentivize and support wheelchair accessible taxis and can manage them according to public needs. And this is just one example of many ways in which San Diego's union taxi sector can be a good partner to planners and public agencies in making transportation work for San Diego. This is something that we ought to keep in mind as we continue to understand both the current impacts of TNCs in our community and work together to imagine their role in connecting our transit system in the future, especially in alignment with Sandag's commitment to uphold equity and inclusion for systematically marginalized groups of people who are impacted both by government action and inaction. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Catherine Rhodes, who will be followed by Lily Arani.
Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes. And so I have some questions. You know, how many Lyft and Uber cars are electric versus gas? It seems like more than usual are electric, and I thought they gave them some type of money to buy electric cars. but I think this is basic information that you should be able to get for your greenhouse gas data. And then, one problem I have about the Lyft and the Uber is there anything Sandag can do about the massive cost increase for rides from the airport at night? The Lyft and Uber fares are up to like 3 times, sometimes like 5 times the normal cost. And when you get this cost increase, late at night after traveling, it just does not seem fair that, they could triple the normal cost at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. So is there something you guys could do about that? Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Lily Arani. You can go ahead.
Hi.
Sorry about that, Lily. You can go ahead now.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lily Irani, and I'm a professor at UC San Diego in the design lab and also a board member of United Taxi Workers San Diego. And like Dr. Holvenskaya, I just wanted to really commend Sandag for doing this rigorous, publicly funded and unbiased research into the transportation practices of San Diegans so that we can come up with transportation solutions that meet our climate goals. I wanted to, as a board member of United Taxi Workers San Diego, I was startled by the finding in particular that only 1% of TNC rides terminate in public transportation. The design lab at UCSD and UTWSD have a vision of how taxis can actually be strategically deployed in collaboration with public agencies to get more people onto public transportation. United Taxi Workers is an immigrant-led union of taxi drivers for whom climate justice and worker justice come together. Taxis are publicly regulated and they can be molded by public agencies for the public good. As such, they can provide data to planners, they comply with background checks already. Speaking to the previous commenter, their prices are regulated publicly, so there is no surge pricing with taxis. And we know from studies of the airport fleets that 97% of taxis are hybrid at a far greater rate than the TNC fleets that we've been hearing about. And there could be coordinated electrification if that meets the climate goals of the region as decided by this agency. So in addition, United Taxi Workers drivers have formed a cooperative so that they can be good partners to Sandag and the city so that public agencies can work with one organization that can contract and kind of shape a flexible service that meets public needs. And so we encourage the city and the county and Sandag to continue to keep in touch as they have in how we can work together to develop this vision of taxis as microtransit to help get people onto transport and address the last few miles to the transit network. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you very much to the public for calling in. We'll begin with Ms. Cooney.
Yes, so I, like the speaker said, I applaud Sandag for doing an independent study of the TNCs. They have been too much of a black box with regard to the data that they are putting forward. And so we really do not, as a government agency, have the data that we need to do any kind of public policy around them. That having been said, I have to, I don't know how long we're going to continue to say these things after the pandemic, but this data is no longer valid for use in making policy because so much has happened since 2019. In this realm of TNCs, what we have seen is one, they've attempted to get away from subsidizing the trips and now they're much more expensive for our users of TNCs. What we have seen is that the taxi industry is surging back, primarily because they have become a much more cost-effective alternative and one that's frankly more stable. I don't know if you've taken TNCs in the last year as I have, But when you take them, you frequently wait much longer than the app tells you because they can be picking up somebody's dinner and dropping it off. They could be doing something else. So I think that there's a great deal of volatility in the industry right now. And I know where from I speak because we are the for-hire vehicle administrators for the region. We are successfully helping the taxi industry weather the storm. And this is very much selfish on the part of MTS as well as altruistic on the part of the drivers, but we really need them. We need the taxi cab industry because they are the ones that helped us get through this, and they will be the ones that help us get through the turmoil that's happening in the TNC world. They also have been able to help supplement the trips for persons on access services during this time. And MTS has a contract, or I'm sorry, our contractor has a contract with Yellow Cab, for instance, to take a lot of our access riders who can take taxis, don't need a lift on one of our vehicles because of their disability is such that they don't have the same mobility issues. So that having been said, I think that it's wonderful that we do look at these things with an eye towards real data, but I don't think this data is going to be useful going forward. We need to possibly continue our efforts to get the TNCs to open up the black box, to give us the data, to help us check where people are taking these rides so that we can then possibly make those decisions about where the curb space should be shared and things like that. That was long, but I felt like it needed to be said.
Thank you very much for your comment. Do we have any further comments from the board? From the committee, I should say. Yes, Mayor Minto.
It's kind of interesting. I agree with you. The data just is almost worthless in my opinion because there's so much has happened. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling also. And, you know, it's kind of crazy because I don't use TNC in San Diego, but I use it every place else. So it leads me to wonder, why don't I? And, but having said that though, I think one of the issues, we obviously want electric vehicles to reduce greenhouse gas effect, except a big guy like me, when a Prius shows up, pretty tough to get into it, in and out. My buddy I travel with once in a while, he's 6'5", 380 pounds, and we just have to tell him, you know, we need another car. But then you get charged for that car that shows up because you had to cancel it. So those are the things that we have to look at also, is what's practical also. And I don't know if I'm a big guy, but if you're still 6'5", I don't care. It's pretty hard to get in the back of a Prius. So anyways, that's one thing I just want us to talk about is, you know, how many people are penalized for, you know, not being able to fit in the car that comes.
Understood. Good point. Any further comments? Councilmember Bob Patel.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to highlight a little bit about what NCTD has been doing, but also provide my own personal perspective on it as well. So I'll speak from the agency's perspective in terms of the pilot that we have been conducting with Uber and Lyft, and then also utilizing our app, an app called TripShot, which allows for us to provide riders with mobility devices to be able to have accessible rides. And then we've been providing discounts to folks to be able to have that first mile, last mile gap filled of $7.50, up to $7.50 for a ride. And then what we've also had in the past, which we're hoping if we do have enough operators in the future, is we did have the Carlsbad connector, especially working within our specific industry business area, where we would have folks from Poinsettia Station go ahead and call from a virtual stop, go ahead and call folks to be able to get onto this shared shuttle. So it wasn't just a single occupancy vehicle. You actually had folks in a shared shuttle that could take that and then go off to work. You could also utilize it for, you know, a lunch break or other stops otherwise. And I think that was a great tool that we had in our city in partnership with, of course, Sandag and NCTD. And so definitely hoping that if we have more operators that we'll be able to bring that back, because I think it was a great asset to the community, and definitely I think something that folks could have used, and it definitely was not the cost of a TNC. And then in terms of my own personal perspective on that, I'm a mom of a young child. I think, you know, from the equity perspective that somebody brought up, we just traveled for the first time recently to New York, and they are the only state that I'm aware of, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that actually provides car seats for TNCs. So that was something that was new and helpful for folks that may be traveling to other areas or even within their own jurisdiction to be able to go from one place to another. And again, that's that equity piece, because how is somebody with a young child going to be able to get around if they are utilizing that? So that is something else that I just wanted to bring up for the record, and something that I think, you know, we should be thinking about and considering as we're thinking about the equity piece.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further comments? Councilmember Mendoza.
As this brought up something I wrote down too, as John mentioned, tourists, when you're, you know, when we travel, we use TNCs. And I think, you know, I used to rent a car, and now I don't even think about using a car because I try to look for other modes of transportation. But we're a tourist town. So possibly a future study would also include tourist behavior, how this affects tourist behavior, because we have a lot of tourists coming into San Diego, and you know, people used to look at our car rental facility. We're a car-centric town, and people rent a lot of cars. Like a tourist who comes here, automatically they think, I'm going to rent a car. And Sharon and I have talked about this before. But we have a great public transportation system, but I think tourists who come here still think, if I'm going to San Diego, I need to ride a car. And somehow people are missing that message. And I know MTS is really trying to get that message out there, you know, at the airport, that you don't have to rent a car when you come to San Diego. And you could, you know, I was in San Jose recently, and I did use TNCs and their public their rail system, and it worked really well. And I was just looking at my phone because, you know, that you can go, when you put your location in, it'll show you how how you can avail yourself of ride sharing service and using public transportation. So it's definitely possible, and I'd like to see a study that includes tourist behavior also.
Thank you very much. Great points. Anything further? Seeing no comments, thank you very much for the presentation. We will now move on to item number 9, the final comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, and Jennifer Williamson will be presenting.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Jennifer Williamson. I'm your Mobility Planning Manager here at Sandag, and I'm also the Project Manager for the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP. I'm joined here today with Ramon Martinez, who is my Co-Project Manager for the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP, as well as Mini Morisaki, Sandag's Project Manager for the San Vicente CMCP, as well as Melina Pereira, who is Caltrans Project Manager. Caltrans and Sandag work together extensively and partner on these CMCPs to develop comprehensive solutions and to better define the projects that are identified in the regional plan. So let's jump into it. We have 3 different items that we'll be covering today. I'll be giving you just a quick background on the CMCPs. You saw some of this data on June 17th when we released the CMCPs for public comment. Then I'll jump in and tell you a little bit about what we heard from the draft to final phase of the project, where we received comments. And then I'll be turning it over to Melina and Mimi to talk to you a little bit about San Vicente and what they heard between the draft and final phase of the project. So just real quickly, I know you guys have seen some of this before. A couple of years ago, the Sandag Board of Directors approved $40 million to undertake 11 CMCPs. 6 of these projects are under development today, and today we're going to be talking about the one that is kind of an orangey color there, and then the purple one, which is my project, the South Bay to Sorrento. The reason we do CMCPs is largely to refine projects, identify new projects, and then also to really outreach to the community to get their understanding of these projects and where they see these projects fitting in with their plans. Corridor plans also are a significant step in helping us to achieve our funding goals for the region. As part of our CMCPs, we're able to outreach and qualify for SB1 funds. And I'll be talking to you a little bit about that in just a minute. So what is the role of CMCP plans? And essentially, we use local and state documents to inform these, as well as public comments. So what you see in the first box up here is several of our local and state plans. You'll see our 2021 regional plan, you'll see the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, and then you'll see California transportation plan that was recently done in 2020. All of these documents feed into what is the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. From there, we take individual projects and we look to secure funding for those projects through SB1 submittals or other types of funding submittals as well. If a project achieves funding, then it's moved into our Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which is a 5-year multi-billion-dollar plan that is really the guiding and building block for getting these projects underway. Once it's in the RTIP, we can begin project implementation, which means that we jump into an environmental document, we do design, or we do construction. So this is the process and why a CMCP is so important, because it's the building block to getting funding. So let's talk about South Bay to Sorrento. It's big, it's really big. So if you look here, this is our project corridor in the purple, that's the entire corridor. It stretches all the way from the international border, San Ysidro, all the way to Otay Mesa East. And then it continues all the way north to the 56 corridor. And the reason we included such a big corridor is because there's projects that want to make this trip, or people that want to make this trip, and projects that will be identified and have been identified that will provide the avenue to make that trip. And one of the most important ones is probably the Purple Line. So that is the corridor that the Purple Line would travel in. On the right-hand side, or my right-hand side, you'll see a whole bunch of different color boxes that represent the same study area. But what we've done here is we've broken down the study area into 7 separate sub areas. And the reason we did this is because the area is so gigantic that it's hard to really understand the different nature of the projects in each of these sub areas. So just to think about it, you know, Coronado is going to have different issues potentially than Sorrento Valley. Mid-City will have different issues than Kearny Mesa. So by breaking it up, we're able to understand what the transportation needs are in each of these different areas. So when we came to you on June 17th, we showed you a list, and this list is in attachment A of your document, of all the strategies that were identified as part of our CMCP process. And just to give you a tiny bit more background, this was a 2-year process, so this didn't happen overnight. It was very comprehensive. We did a significant number of public outreach meetings that I'll talk to you about in a minute. And this is the outcome of that project. It's over 330 strategies. And even though we tried to kind of identify them in each of these different focus areas, it's important to note that a lot of these strategies kind of overlap into or combined areas, if you will, combined focused areas. So this is a breakdown of the strategies that were identified during the actual planning process. As I said, we came to you on June 17th, gave you a big presentation, showed you all those projects. And then we took time during that period between draft and final to do one final stakeholder presentation where we showed them, these are the strategies. We talked to them about the process of making comments. We asked them if there was anything additional that they wanted us to know about the projects during that presentation. And then as part of that presentation, we heard, hey, we need more time. We had an initial 30-day public comment period. We added an additional 15 days to that to allow the folks to give us more comments. We received 200 comments. The majority of them were in support of transit projects and active transportation projects. We have several new ones in the plan. And then we also heard a significant amount of concern from our stakeholders. And the concern really stems around a particular project, one particular project in this study area that is a managed lanes connector from 805 to 15. This managed lanes connector would be utilized by HOV and transit. And the goal is really to provide folks that are coming up from the South County with access to job centers in Kearney Mesa, UTC. That's the purpose of the connector, to prioritize transit and HOV with faster service to these areas. Their concern stems around a concern that the managed lane connector and the supporting infrastructure would be VMT inducing. And so you'll hear a lot of folks here today, and I know that you've received a number of comments about that. As part of the grant that will be, and let me take a step back. So that project is actually proposed to be our first grant that comes out of the CMC process. So this project is part of an existing 805 environmental impact report that was completed in 2011. And this project is cleared environmentally, this managed lanes connector. So it does qualify for SB1 funding, and we can't submit it as a grant submittal. And so that is our intent, and you'll hear a lot more about it. And I know that my colleagues here at Caltrans can also speak to any of the questions or concerns you might have regarding it. So we also heard between draft and final, people came up with new strategies. So we had 330 and they thought, whoa, wait, we want to get a few more in here. So, we wanted to make sure we captured these, and we added a new attachment, attachment D, which is all of the new strategies that were identified between draft and final. The reason these are not incorporated into attachment A is that we haven't done the level of analysis on these projects that we did on all of the other projects as part of the detailed planning process. What we're proposing here that we do as part of the regional plan update is that we go ahead and analyze these projects. And that's what will happen with almost all of the projects in the CMCP anyway, that get fed into the next regional plan for detailed analysis. So these projects would go into that mix as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our project managers to tell you a little bit about the San Vicente CMCP.
Thank you, Jennifer. So as a brief orientation to the corridor, this slide presents the study area and the area of influence for the San Vicente plan. The corridor connects the unincorporated communities of Ramona and Lakeside to the city of Poway and the San Diego region, and provides access to the tribal lands of the Barona Band of Mission Indians, the Ipai Nation of Santa Isabel, and the Mesa Grande Band of Mission Indians. The study area is defined as the area within a 2-mile radius of SR 67, extending from Mapleview Street in Lakeside to 10th Street in Ramona. The surrounding lighter shade on this slide represents the area of influence. And the area of influence will be impacted by the proposed transportation solutions proposed in our CMCP. The needs or focus areas we identified were used as a guide for developing our transportation solutions. Each project or strategy doesn't address just one need, but was assigned to a primary focus area for the sake of this project inventory of transportation solutions. Safety was considered in the development of all projects. These strategies directly focus on addressing specific safety issues such as falling rock protection devices and dynamic message signs to provide real-time conditions. Projects included in the evacuation list include short-term, more immediate projects like warning sirens, smart intersection systems, and tow truck deployment. Other long-term projects are also included, such as shoulder widening and multi-use paths that will allow for an additional evacuation lane for people to evacuate, as well as emergency vehicle access. So our active transportation project list includes projects like new bikeways, equestrian trails, and sidewalk enhancements. We've identified over 130 active transportation projects or strategies, and that may seem like a lot, but that is due to the nature of these types of projects, which are often shorter in length and smaller in size, and therefore tend to be more numerous in comparison to, say, a more traditional project, projects that are larger in size and longer in length, such as shoulder widening projects. The San Vicente CMCP also incorporates active transportation strategies from local jurisdictions, such as the County of San Diego's Active Transportation Plan. And so when you add it all up, that's over 130 active transportation strategies or projects. Our proposed transportation solutions for traffic congestion and goods movement include truck climbing lanes, smart intersection systems, shuttles, and rideshare programs in order to enhance the corridor's efficiency. Examples of utility project types include backup power sources to enhance communications during evacuation, and EV or electric vehicle charging stations for the growing number of electric vehicles on the road. So a full list of these solutions can be found in Chapter 4 of the CMCP document. The San Vicente CMCP was released, the draft was released for public review on May 31st. We initially had a 30-day comment period, which was extended to 60 days. We received over 100 comments. And on the slide, you can see which focus areas received the most comments. So most comments were received related to safety, traffic congestion, and evacuation. For addressing evacuation capacity, Caltrans is also working on the highway improvement project to analyze the evacuation lane and lane expansion requests. During the public review period, we received comments from the public, the community planning groups, our partner agencies, and elected officials. We have met and briefed with elected official staff. Comments were also received via our virtual engagement hub through emails and through letters. And several of the comments resulted in updates to the final San Vicente CMCP document and the project inventory. Some of the notable changes to the project inventory included intersection reconfiguration and enhancements at key intersections, extending the boundaries of a speed limit study along the wine country segment of the corridor, and removal of on-street parking at trailheads pending parking lot expansions, additional sidewalk enhancements, and wayfinding signage. So this table summarizes these new strategies with the potential to address San Vicente CMCP priorities that were developed as a result of the comments that we received. So as Jennifer mentioned, there will be future updates to these CMCPs. So this is an iterative process. The strategies recommended in these CMCPs will be evaluated for incorporation into the next regional plan. And now that these CMCPs are complete, the projects identified in the CMCPs can be pursued by SANDAG, Caltrans, and other partner agencies to apply for Senate Bill 1 funding and other funding or grant opportunities. That concludes my presentation, and we will take questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We will now turn to public comment. Ms. Webb.
Thank you, Chair. We do have several public comments on this item, and I did want to let the committee know that some of the public comments are going to be in Spanish. So you'll see you have an interpretation device at your seat. You'll need to press the center button to turn that on, and then you should get live simultaneous interpretation into English when the Spanish speakers are speaking. And same for anybody in the audience. There are headsets available in the lobby if you'd like to hear the simultaneous interpretation. So we'll go to the in-person public comments first. We have Toshi Ishihara, and Toshi will be followed by Maria Cortez.
Hello, is it ready? Yeah.
Yes, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairperson, and then also all committee members, and then some of my friends here. So I am very happy to be here finally, to be able to speak in front of you, without going through my computers. So anyway, so my name is Toshi Ishihara. I'm a volunteer with San Diego 350. San Diego 350 is a climate change advocacy organization. So as you have seen this summer, climate change started impacting so many aspects of our lives. And we heard many tragedies, right? Like flood, people are dying in those developing countries, and even San Diego. So we had like heat waves, which lasted about 1 week or 2 weeks. And also there are many other issues I have seen in these countries, okay? So speaking of CMCP, so San Diego staff member really reach out to community members and also community-based organizations. And I really appreciated their effort, and the CMCP in general in a very good shape. However, I have to emphasize that CMCPs must strive for reducing vehicle mile travel, VMTs, as one of the main objectives. So freeway expansions, even shoulder conversion to so-called managed lane, like the project number 557 in the South Bay to Sorrento Valley CMCP, I think Jennifer just mentioned, described as managed lane connectors at SR 15 and 805, should not proceed unless those new lanes will be built for public transportation, public transit only. And also, San Diego needs to make sure whatever the plan you are presenting and going to put in practice will be agreed upon by those communities which will be affected by the particular project. Adding new lanes, even for HOV and fast track, will induce more vehicles. So we have many evidence of that. So nobody can deny that. Okay. I would like to also remind that the SR 15 and the 805 connectors are in EJ communities. So instead of spending effort and our tax money to add more lanes for non-transit vehicles, San Diego's effort should be directed towards reducing the number of vehicles running on the freeways and other major roadways. And I think CMCP has a great opportunity to achieve those objectives. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Maria Cortez, who will be followed by Jesse Ramirez.
Hello, and yes, it's good to be in person now. So thank you. My name is Maria Cortez, and I am a resident of City Heights. I would like to thank, first of all, Sandag for what they have done, listening to the community, because this is what it's about. And I just want to say thank you. Also, I want to say thank you for supporting the Purple Line alignment through the Central City Heights, because we have been needing the Purple Line. I have been on that thing for 45 years now. All of the gray hairs is from this. So I really appreciate you guys coming through with the Purple Line. I would like to see maybe if the Purple Line could be speeded up a little bit, like maybe to 2035. Also, I would oppose freeways expansions that increase the vehicle miles traveled in City Heights and exclude environmental justice communities. We want to make sure that the freeways do not get expanded because we are the ones that suffer the most. And also, I want to make sure that we are ensuring the youth opportunity passes for the ages 24 and under, because this is something that is needed very much throughout the region of San Diego. And yes, it started in City Heights, but it's coming through to everybody in San Diego. And that includes East County, everybody, North County, South County, South Bay. I also want to say that the Purple Line coming in through the South Bay into Central City Heights and going into the North County, you're going to see a big difference because this is what everybody needs. And going through climate change, my God, to the people that told us climate change, what? There's no climate change. Yes, there is. My husband was one of them, and guess what? He believes it now. It took the humidity. Look at the humidity that's going on that happened to us. It took a lot of people to finally realize that this is true. So I want everybody here, not only here, but everybody throughout San Diego, throughout the region, to see what we're doing. And maybe we can start the legacy and go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jesse Ramirez, who will be followed by Randy Torres Van Black.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I would like to start off by thanking the Transportation Committee for allowing me to speak and to Sandag and Caltrans staff for being in dialogue with us. My name is Jesse Ramirez, and I am the Community Engagement Manager at City Heights CDC, but most importantly, I am a City Heights resident. I'd like to comment on the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP. The plan has tons of benefits, a lot of good things that improve mobility across our regions. Projects like the Purple Line will allow for San Diegans to move across our region more efficiently. The plan also takes into account other modes of transportation, such as active transportation, which will help us in our fight against climate change. However, as Jennifer expressed, there are some concerns within the plan, particularly Project 557, which has the potential of increasing vehicles miles traveled in City Heights and be a major setback on addressing climate change. I'm here to emphasize that we should not see any freeway expansion or any kind of lane conversions that will increase vehicles miles traveled. With Project 557, we have an opportunity, and just the overall South Bay to Sorrento plan, we have an opportunity to meet our region's mobility goals and also address climate change. With transit-only lanes, we can make this happen. As the last heat wave showed, we do not have the infrastructure to deal with climate change. Our state cannot keep up with the energy demands that come with the heat. And a lot of environmental justice communities and just folks in general in San Diego do not have AC to live with the heat that we experienced recently. We have an opportunity here with the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP to address our transportation needs and move people more efficiently in San Diego, while also reducing BMT and taking action on climate change. The last heat wave showed that we must take action now. This is a good opportunity to implement the 10 transit lifelines that are found on the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Randy Torres Van Black, who will be followed by Esperanza.
Good morning, Transportation Committee members. My name is Randy Torres Van Vleck. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at the City Heights CDC. We appreciate the opportunity to have worked closely with staff, community members on the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP these past 2 years. We're excited for many elements of the CMCP, especially the Purple Line, a high-speed underground commuter rail that will connect our border communities, South Bay, where I grew up, Central City Heights, Kearny Mesa area, and Sorrento Valley. We are happy to see the Blue Line Express, Rapid Route 625, South Bay Ferry Services, SR 94 Cat Park, Southeast, and San Ysidro Mobility Hubs, and more. So there is a lot to like about the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP, but we do have concerns, as Ms. Williamson pointed out, about the potential for additional HOV freeway lanes that may increase VMT, increase greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in our already overburdened communities. And we have shared that concern consistently for years in the past few RTPs. In particular, we have concerns about managed lane connectors for the 805 and 15 in City Heights, reference number 557 and Appendix A. And we learned that Caltrans is pursuing a $75 million application to the state and plan to submit that in the coming months. This project, which has an EIR from 2011, calls for HOV lanes through City Heights, Southeast, and North Park. And research released since 2011 has shown that adding HOV lanes induces VMT and increases car traffic by expanding the space for additional car capacity. Even if a bus rapid transit, a BRT, can share the new lanes with HOV traffic, the pros and cons of that scenario must be weighed. We know how to improve transit mobility without increasing VMT. We've done it before with the Rapid 235 lanes on the SR 15. The letters sent to you by the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group and the City Heights Built Environment Team lay out our position on this matter in greater detail. And to summarize that, we do oppose freeway expansions, the addition of new lanes that increases VMT in City Heights, urban core communities, environmental justice communities, and other historically excluded communities. We like to see an analysis of a conversion of a general purpose lane into a transit only lane or a managed lane, and to conduct a pilot to try that out. And we understand that the managed lane implementation study could be an opportunity for that. We do appreciate the new concepts that came forward in Appendix D, and many of our asks are included in that, such as youth opportunity passes, 24 and under, 24-hour bus service, Choice Creek bikeways, and the extension of the SR 15 transit only lanes all the way down to the 94 from the 15. City Heights CDC looks forward to working with staff to address the concerns of projects that may induce VMT and to implement the transit and active transportation projects of the South Bay to Sorrento CMCP. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Esperanza, who will be followed by Briseida. You can go ahead.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Esperanza González. Soy residente de City Heights, promotora de la Coalición de Salud Ambiental. A nombre de mi comunidad, les doy las gracias por el proyecto de la línea morada que fue posible que pasara por nuestra comunidad de City Heights. Muchísimas gracias. Estoy aquí también para pedirles que la rampa que se le quiere anexar para conectar a la autopista 805 con el 15 sea solo para uso exclusivo del transporte público. ¿Por qué? Porque ya tenemos mucho congestionamiento vehicular en toda la ciudad. El aire que respiramos está más contaminado, tenemos más enfermedades, el calentamiento global, por ejemplo. La semana pasada todos sufrimos la ola de calor y así vamos a seguir año con año. Necesitamos que la madre tierra ya dé un respiro. Yo soy un usuario del bus y veo la gran necesidad diario, día con día, de que debemos hacer cambios. Tenemos que invertir toda nuestra energía juntos para hacer cambios, que todos salgamos beneficiados. Por eso les pedimos nuevamente que la rampa que unirá a la autopista 805 y 15 sea exclusivo para el transporte público. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Briseida Cisneros, and who will be followed by Carolina Martinez.
Hola, buenos días a todos y a todas. Mi nombre es Briseida Cisneros, vivo en City Heights. Yo uso el transporte público 2 o 3 veces por semana. Yo estoy aquí para pedirles que el carril para conectar la autopista 805 con el Freeway 15 para mí sería mejor que sea para el transporte público, para conectarnos, para ir a nuestros trabajos y para ir a los hospitales. Salir con mi familia los fines de semana es importante para nosotros. Nosotros los usuarios del transporte ocupamos más camiones para no estar tanto tiempo esperando. Y además tenemos mucha contaminación y el calentamiento global nos está afectando a todos. Por eso estoy aquí para pedirles que el carril que conecta la autopista 805 con el 15 sea solo para el transporte público. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Our final in-person speaker will be Carolina Martinez, and then we'll go to the comments on Zoom. On Zoom, we'll be starting with Maritza Garcia. Carolina, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate Briseida. It's her first testimony at the SANDAG meeting. Good morning. My name is Carolina. It's exciting to be here. I'm with the Environmental Health Coalition and the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group. We're here to request that the ramp project to connect the 805 with the 15 via shoulder lane conversion is for transit only purposes. First, the good news. We support and are grateful for the revised alignment of Route 582, or the Purple Line as we know it. It's part of the 10 transit lifelines, and it has been realigned to ensure it services City Heights. We celebrate that and we're grateful. We also agree with the sentiment of the draft CMCP that the climate crisis requires our region to take urgent and unprecedented steps to significantly move more San Diegans on transit and connect them to affordable housing and jobs. However, as my colleagues mentioned, and also the staff has mentioned, we have concerns about seeing so many managed lanes and a lot of funding dedicated to managed lane projects. It is clear that we're facing a climate crisis. In the San Diego region, most of our greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. 70% of the jobs in our region are not reachable by transit. Imagine what our region would be like if we had our jobs reachable by transit. The economy would flip overnight, and it's something that we could do. We also know that only 12% of low-income folks have access to reliable transit. But we have solutions, and unfortunately what we're seeing in this plan is a sum of about $6.4 billion dedicated to solely managed lane projects, instead of investing that money on transit. So we're here to ask that the 805 15 connector project be amended to ensure it is a transit-only project, so that we invest on the urgency that the region has and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we make sure that we don't create more BMT projects. Unfortunately, the state of California has seen a lot of projects like this one, a lot of managed lanes that were approved 10 years ago. That were done and approved with old thinking. And as a result, we're seeing billions of funding continuing to go to BMT inducing projects. And so we're here to request that we don't have yet another one example in the state of California that is going to increase BMT. So we ask that the project be transit only. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to the speakers online. First will be Maritza Garcia, followed by Steve Gelb.
Hello, good morning. My name is Maritza Garcia, and I'm a resident of Logan Heights, as well as a promotora for the Environmental Health Coalition. I'd like to start off by thanking you for routing the Purple Line through City Heights, which is a neighborhood that desperately needs more accessible public transportation for its community members. However, there is a troubling aspect to this regional plan that needs to be addressed, and that is the shoulder lane conversion of an all-traffic on-ramp connecting the 805 and 15 freeway. Instead, it should be a lane dedicated to transit only. Expanding the freeway through shoulder lane conversion for more cars does nothing but harm the surrounding communities and add to the pollution vehicles emit. I am all too aware of the harm freeways can bring, as my community was literally split in half by the 5 freeway years ago. We're constantly living in polluted air, and I don't wish for that same result to occur in other neighborhoods. It was mentioned earlier that the environment was not going to be harmed, and I think that is completely false when, again, neighbors that have to live next to the freeway get that instant impact. A dedicated transit lane will help make public transportation more appealing and therefore gain more patron riders. This will help decrease the amount of traffic we typically find on our roads. So please revise the South Bay to Sorrento plan to convert the 805 to 15 on-ramp into a transit-only lane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Steve Gelb, followed by Karina Contreras. Steve, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Campillo and Transportation Committee. I'm Steve Gelb with San Diego 350. With so many others, I applaud SANDAG for centering equity in all of its regional planning. You have recognized the injustice of previous decisions that have placed highways through environmental justice communities and left them with air and noise pollution. And today you've heard from residents and from nonprofit leaders based in these communities, asking you to change a connector plan that would add to the injustice these communities have experienced. One other thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is that if there are HOVs allowed on a bus rapid transit shoulder lane, it will slow the buses down. If you look at some of the HOV lanes on Highway 5, for example, there's often tremendous congestion in those lanes, and they don't move much more quickly than the general traffic lanes. So keeping this expansion lane to transit only is in support of the climate, and it's in support of creating transit that is efficient and healthy. So for all of these reasons, I ask you to support these environmental justice communities by limiting traffic on the new Highway 805 to 15 connector to transit lanes only. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karina Contreras, who will be followed by Nicole Burgess. Karina, you can go ahead.
Hello, my name is Karina Contreras. I'm speaking in my capacity as transportation policy advocate for Climate Action Campaign. And as has been mentioned, there's a lot to like in the CMC plan. But when it comes to connecting the 15 and the 805, what I want to say is that we have spent so much money in expanding freeways that there's a great opportunity to transform some of those lanes that have already, increased the capacity, and we meet induced demand with vehicles traveling to and from different places. But we can take a look at that infrastructure that's already been built and see what it takes to convert one of those lanes for transit only. There's no need to expand freeways when we already have the infrastructure allocated, and all we need to do is take a look at a plan to convert that infrastructure into transit only. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and I hope that you take into consideration the comments and the suggestions from communities that have been severely impacted by freeway expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nicole Burgess, who will be followed by Balin Hernandez, and Balin will be our final speaker on this item.
Thank you, Sandag Transportation Board, for letting me speak on this item. I first want to give you a special thank you to all of you, especially Chair Campillo and the leaders that speak for safety and support for safe bike infrastructure and active transportation. It really, truly is fabulous to hear our leaders advocating for this mode. I've been doing a lot of work advocating for the Chollas Creek Coalition, so I spend a lot of my time commuting to Southeast San Diego and experiencing the lack of infrastructure, the barriers of the freeways, and the inequities in this area. So I appreciate the plan, the work that's been done to include Chollas Creek alignment and other, okay things in the plan. There are good things, like mentioned. The purple line is definitely great, and I appreciate all the public comment and want to support their comments and reiterate that more lanes equals induced traffic and VMTs. So just looking at the Sorrento to South Bay CMCP, you know, when I look at it, I think Transit Leap, complete corridor, yay. I'll check those because I believe transit's going to be light rail. It's going to be great transit. I believe complete corridor is actually going to take an account of people walking and biking. But when I dive into this 330 strategies, the majority of strategies are a transit leap that is moving more cars. And it's through the access of HOV and managed lanes. And it feels like we had a very comprehensive approach to looking at an entire network of building more off-ramps and on-ramps to connect these, when in reality, we did not do the same for active transportation. So looking at 805 and 15, which is a huge concern, and I support all the commenters and not, you know, public transit on this corridor only in the right of way that we have now. And then as an active commuter, standing at 805 and 15, in order to get across those two freeways, one has to go either 1.5 miles north or 1.5 miles south. So you either have Market Street to the south in Southeast San Diego, or you have Landis up in North Park. The barriers there of the freeways have to be addressed. And so if there's any type of project in this community, the access for people moving by bike and foot across these, to get across these freeways and through the canyons has to be identified. So I asked Sandag to really go back and get the fine tune. Our bike plans are outdated, and we really need to look at these connections so that these folks can have access, and appreciate that this plan is still a working product and we can continue to input. Thank you for allowing my time to speak.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Balin Hernandez. Balin, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. This is Belen Hernandez, Policy Advocate with Mid-City Can. I am calling in solidarity with the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group and all the speakers this morning. First, I want to thank you for all your hard work on designing these corridors. We are very excited about many of the amazing projects included in the South Bay to Serrano corridor, such as the Purple Line. However, we are also calling in because we want to highlight that our strategies in these corridors must always reduce vehicle miles traveled and freeway expansion. So overall, we need more transit-only lanes. Today, we've highlighted a specific example, this ramp, but overall, we need more transit-only lanes. Thank you.
Thank you, and Chair, that concludes the public commenters.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the presentation today from staff. We heard from callers that there are concerns about future managed lanes, and I understand their concerns that these future managed lanes would not be used for public transit since there is not currently a bus route to use an additional managed lane if it were to be added to the freeway. And as an organization, we continue to prioritize investing in public transit rather than continuing the trend of adding more and more lanes, which we know does not relieve congestion or help us meet climate goals. Ms. Deaton, it's my understanding that while this is agendized as an information item, our agency rules allow for a motion at this time. Am I correct in that understanding?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, the committee is permitted to take action on any item that is on the agenda, so long it is consistent with the subject matter of the agenda and the way that it is described.
Thank you. Given that, I would like to make a motion. I will move that the Transportation Committee direct Sandag staff to collaborate with Caltrans to prioritize transit-only lanes in the analysis of the I-805 and 15 managed lanes, and I will seek a second for that motion. I hear a second from Commissioner Naranjo. Thank you. It's important to prioritize this strategy. I appreciate everyone else who raised their hand on that. Thank you for that. It's important to prioritize this strategy as we move throughout the planning process for the South Bay to Sorrento Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan to help meet not just our climate and environmental goals. I'm excited to see the progress of the CMCP, and I think that more and more we can invest in regional planning efforts like this, the more we can chip away at the need to connect different areas around our region. And we must move forward with our comprehensive multimodal corridor plan to improve mobility options for everyone, regardless of where they live. Thank you for the presentation, and I will turn to Councilmember Sankey first.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A couple quick comments on the items related to my jurisdiction. I'm particularly intrigued to see the inclusion of the possibility of converting the center lane of the bridge to an HOV lane. We've talked about that several times. I figure if we did it on a Sunday night, there'd be people late to work on Monday, and by Tuesday, they'd all have carpool partners. Reducing vehicle miles traveled has been a theme of this particular agenda item's public discussion, and the contribution of the military to vehicles mile traveled is significant, specifically in our region, and especially in this corridor. I'm extremely excited to see Express Bus for NASNY and 901 service improvements included in the Section A. I'm sad that the carpool option is included in Section D and hope at some point that moves forward. And I know, Gustavo, we've talked about this for several years. Ferry service also is extremely exciting to see, particularly as it relates to not only military commuters, but the Chula Vista Bayfront development is going to be a great opportunity to use the bay more as a part of our regional transportation infrastructure, as opposed to simply a novelty. But in regards to the motion, and I don't want to put Gustavo on the spot here, but I'd like a little bit more information on this particular project that we're talking about, a little more background, and for example, have we gotten far enough in that study, since you said it was done in 2011, or it was presented that it was done in 2011 by one of the public speakers. Does it in fact, in Caltrans's current analysis, increase vehicles miles traveled, and what would be the impact of the project's success or failure if it were in turn turned into a transit-only option? Again, I'm intrigued that we're doing something without building something new. We're taking advantage of existing infrastructure, but we should probably do it in a way that not only reflects the needs of the regional transit infrastructure, but also the needs of the neighbors. Gustavo, through the chair, of course.
All right, thank you. So first, let me thank all the members of the community that took their time to come here and give us many insightful comments. So let me start by saying that I really appreciate the time that staff spent over the last 3 years, basically nearly 3 years, right? Developing all these ideas under the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans for both the San Vicente and the South Bay to Sorrento. This is a great menu of projects that will feed. It's a planning study. So not all of these ideas will lead eventually to projects, actual projects that will be financed and funded and built. But it's a great menu to play with and to feed into regional transportation planning for the future. So most of the comments today were about a specific project in the 805-15 corridor. So as you know, on the 805 corridor, we've previously built HOV lanes that come from Chula Vista and basically end on 94. These HOV lanes play a vital role for the South Bay BRT that we also launched as part of that system, because the South Bay BRT comes in from Palomar, has dedicated lanes on Palomar, then uses the HOV lanes. But when it gets to 94, the buses have to get out. And we're going to hear in the next presentation how we have partially mitigated some of the issues with buses on shoulder. But the reality is that once they get out, the buses are not traveling at freeway speeds. They're traveling much slower, usually in congested lanes. So where the HOV lanes at 94, there's congestion on the 805 freeway. What the project originally envisioned was having the HOV lanes go an additional 3 miles north, all the way up to 15, and connecting those HOV lanes to 15 with HOV connectors. Now, as you may know, on 15, there are no HOVs. So I appreciate in this section of 15, we've invested in the Centerline stations at University El Cajon and in transit-only lanes on 15 that go from basically 805 all the way to 8. So I appreciate the community's insight of basically saying why are we building connectors that serve HOVs to a facility that doesn't have HOV. It's transit only. But the question remains, what do you do in that 3-mile section for transit, basically from 94 to 15? Like I said, the original plan was to construct a managed lane that will be prioritizing bus service, but will also be able to use by multi-occupancy vehicles. So the regional transportation plan envisions completing the managed lane system on 805 through a system of managed lanes being built on the shoulder, and also a second set of managed lanes being built by converting GP lanes. The reality is that when we're talking about asking for funding, we're talking about a program called Congested Corridors. So whatever funding we ask for needs to be for a project that will reduce congestion in this stretch of the highway. So I think we should continue collaborating with the community, taking their input, and coming up with a plan that if we're going to be competing for state and federal funding, that makes sense. And this is not just for one particular area, but also for the traffic that is trying to make it through this area. There's the transit service that I mentioned, we launched serves downtown, but there is a huge ridership that is trying to come from South Bay and go towards the Central Line stations and continue on to Kearny Mesa. And an additional ridership that is trying to go from the South Bay through this area all the way to Sorrento Valley. That's where a lot of the jobs and other destinations are. How do we get those buses in a lane that will make sense and that will not in an area where we're going to create more congestion, that is going to encourage violations, and also that is not going to compete well for funding because you're not serving the purpose of that funding program, which is to relieve congestion. I think we're all in this day and age, we're all in the business of moving people, and transit and Transit Leap do that. But we also need to consider managed lanes as part of that solution. Our regional transportation plan includes complete corridors in addition to Transit Leap, and I think that both can live together. They are not mutually exclusive.
That's very interesting. What struck me was we have a congested corridors funding pile, but yet we're being driven towards VMT reduction through all our planning. And those two, like you said, they can't be mutually exclusive. They have to live together. And we have to be responsive to the different needs of our commuters. You mentioned also violations, promoting violations. I know that when we opened the Centerline station, we had a lot of folks thinking that was an HOV lane and driving through there. And we had MTS had to paint red on the street and signage, and there's a lot of CHP activity in that area too to remind people that that's not a trans or HOV or even a general purpose lane. Is that the sort of the violation sort of promotion that you're sort of trying to avoid?
Well, I think there's two issues. One is when we opened the transit lanes, there was some amount of confusion because we didn't have lanes like that in the region. So some people thought, well, this may be the same way the managed lanes that we have on other parts of the county. And we addressed that with help from the CHP and also by coming up with innovative striping to designate the entrance to these lanes by being red. But the other thing that drives violation is if there is a lot of congestion and you have a very short segment of a lane that is contiguous to traffic and anybody can access just to bypass that congestion. And that's the part where we need to consider what's the best alternative for this 3 mile section on 805 between 94 and 15. And yes, I think we need to look at the connection between 805 and 15, the connectors, what is the best purpose for them. But we need to make this quickly because the deadline for applications on congested corridors is coming at the end of this year. And I'm sure that they will be looking for projects that fit in within that, the purpose for that program, but also that align with state and federal goals as well. That's why we were successful in getting $500 million to this region recently. We got to continue doing that.
Okay, thank you, Gustavo. That really helps frame things for me. And one question for the staff folks. One of the things I've advocated for in Coronado is automated speed enforcement on Highway 282. We've had pushback from CHP on that, pushback from the legislature in Sacramento on that. Is there something about including that in one of the strategies that has changed and gives us an opportunity to use that as a method of sort of reclaiming a neighborhood from my standpoint, or use it in other parts of the region?
Yeah, no, I don't specifically know. I don't have my list in front of me if that is called out individually. But what you'll see when you look through that list is that we had substantial NextOS technology-driven projects. And that is something that we would evaluate as part of those projects. So I can discuss with you, after this meeting where we would be doing that as part of that study. Nothing has changed with it, though.
As far as the overall state approach to it?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'm certain my community would like to continue that discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Mendoza.
Thank you for the explanation about the funding. Unfortunately, I have to drive through this way at 7:30 in the morning once a week. I have to go pick up food in Miramar, so I have to drive from Lemon Grove up 805 to the food bank. And so you come off the 94, and then that's right where the 805 and the 15 are, you're crossing over. Do you go this way or that way, for me? And the congestion is terrible there in the morning, which leads me to think that also the air quality in that area is horrible. And the same thing late in the afternoon, which I can avoid ever driving at that time during that area. But I have to go that way once a week. There's, and I can remember, over 50 years ago when there was no 805 or 15, and entire neighborhoods were, this area was hard hit when those two freeways went in. There's also a lot of freight on the roads in the morning and in the afternoon, and I'm talking a lot of freight and coming from I'm not sure where it's coming from, but probably heading to all areas north. And I don't know if there's any way we can restrict freight from driving during high commuter times. And then my other comment that I have is Councilmember Campillo mentioned, and the public has talked about transit-only lanes, but I think we should include carpooling, two or more people in a vehicle in these lanes. But there's a difference between carpooling and allowing people to pay to get into a lane. And I think I've done a little bit of research on this. I'm not an expert, but carpooling does would I think eliminate congestion and vehicle miles traveled, whereas a managed lane that people can pay to drive in would not. So I just am not clear on whether this would include the managed lanes that you can pay for, or just a carpool lane, like we have is on the 805 right now is just a carpool lane. I think those are all my comments.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Anything further? I will start with Councilmember Zito and Commissioner Naranjo as well after.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I found that question interesting. I don't know if there's an answer to it with respect to what the plans are. I mean, to follow up, I have another question. I believe it's kind of up to the organization with appropriate studies to determine if something is a managed lane, what the rules are for the use of that lane. So have we, I mean, if we go ahead and say is potentially to be used for a managed lane, I mean, at some point in the future, I'm assuming we could say managed lane means you got to have 4 people in a vehicle to use it if we want to, as opposed to just 2. And that we do have that flexibility in the future as well. And I would be curious, if we go forward with the plan as it is it expected that these lanes are pay for access or only carpool lanes?
I can address that, and Jennifer jump in because you know more about this than I know probably. So initially the intent is to build them as carpool lanes. And just like we're building carpool lanes on I-5, and just like we build the carpool lanes on 805 south of this area and also north of 52. Ultimately, the regional plan envisions converting all of our carpool lanes to managed lanes. The reason for that is that particularly where you have single carpool lanes, eventually they will get filled up. and you want to keep them congestion-free. Why? Because they're being used by transit. You want those buses to continue traveling at freeway speed. How can you manage them? As you mentioned, you can increase occupancy to 3+, or you can also introduce pricing where you may still discount the high occupancy vehicles. And if there is extra capacity, you can let single occupant vehicles, but the single occupant are always the least priority. Usually you make it free for transit, and then you have a pricing structure that encourages carpooling. But the intent is that these lanes need to be flowing free and not congested.
And has anyone implemented at this point in time a managed lane that would be require multiple occupancy and potentially a fee? Has that been done?
Yes, not in our region, but there are examples.
Okay, I mean, given this, I think I can see the intent and reason behind the original plan. And I did want to say thank you to all the people that showed up and spoke. I appreciate and hear your comments, and as well as the ones that are online. And this is, I do want to make sure that we're listening and paying attention to those comments, but I am somewhat swayed by the, our ability to have more flexibility going in the future, and we can, and make sure that we're developing strategies to drive VMT down even by having a managed lane there. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. So I do want to thank the community for coming out and for speaking and for sharing your comments. It is evident that we are in the climate crisis with the heat waves that we experience, and this tells us that we must rethink the way that we do transportation, the way we think about policy, and the focus on addressing climate, health, and equity. Most of you may be aware of the recent AB 285 report that was published by the Strategic Growth Council and UCITS. And what that report was so alarming was that it found that there was misalignment between our state climate goals and our transportation funding, with only 2% of our transportation funding being aligned with our climate goals. So a transportation budget, billions and billions of dollars, only 2% is aligned with our climate. And I bring up the AB 285 report because it is my understanding that this is a candidate for the Solutions for Congested Corridor Program, the SCCP. And SCCP was one of the 11 transportation programs examined in the AB 285 report and found to be in the category of having the largest funding compared to the newer 5 transportation programs called out in AB 285, with an emphasis to improve mobility in California, but lacking the statutory funding commitments to address environmental protections of disadvantaged communities. So I see and I applaud the many great strategies that are in this plan, but again, I'm very concerned about the managed lane, considering that we have additional reports such as the draft scoping plan and the SB 150 report that really states that we need to reduce an average of 20% of VMT. And all in all, we won't meet our climate targets. And we've already suffered this past weeks of what it means when we do not meet our climate targets. So I think we know where we're at, where we need to go. And so I really stand fully behind the comments made from the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group and the community members of City Heights who have suffered the consequences of really past poor transportation planning, and we need to do better and we need to be aggressive. And so I really suggest that we reconsider and really put in a project that would get us above and beyond, because that's what we need right now is projects that get us above and beyond our minimum baseline, because it will be too late. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments?
One more.
Yes, Councilmember Sankey.
I'm going to be supportive of the motion for the pause to reflect on the part of staff and have them take a look. I think the community members have made it clear to us that we should take a look at that. But I think the points made by my 2 colleagues to my right really do ring true, because we still have to move people in cars. And as the Caltrans district director pointed out, we don't get a transit lane that might someday be a managed lane without first getting funding from the corridors program, the corridors program that he described for which we need to make a decision by the end of the year. So we might sacrifice the good for the perfect, and I don't want to do that. But again, to your point, Mr. Campillo, I will be supportive of the motion for the pause to reflect, outlined mostly because of the public comments we've heard today. And I hope by the time this recommendation gets voted on by this committee and moved on to the board, that we have a general consensus among us around here and an understanding of the issue, and can give the board a clear direction on where we think this particular project ought to go.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll now, Ms. Webb, we'll move to the vote.
Can you restate the motion, please?
Yes, absolutely. My motion was to move that the Transportation Committee direct Sandag staff to collaborate with Caltrans to prioritize transit-only lanes in the analysis of the I-805 and I-15 managed lanes. Say it one more time. That the Transportation direct Sandag staff to collaborate with Caltrans to prioritize transit-only lanes in the analysis of the I-805 to 15 managed lanes.
This ought to be interesting. 3-2. Oh.
And that item passes unanimously with those members present.
Well done, council member.
Thank you very much to my colleagues on this committee for great questions, for analyzing key points. Mr. Gallarda, I really appreciate your detailed responses to what the plan, what the CMCP is, and where we're going with it as a region. And I truly appreciate the public for calling in, for being here today, and for Sandag staff for all your answers as well. I know we're all working towards the same goal here, so thank you very much for taking this into consideration. We will now move to item 10. It's our last report for the day. It's the I-805 to State Route 94 transit-only lane start of service. And we have Peter Thompson for item 10. We'll take a moment to let staff set up.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning.
My name's Karen Jewell. I'm the Corridor Director for the Central Corridors, and we are so excited to introduce this transit-only lanes pilot project and announce and give you an update on the launch that went off in June. This project has been a great collaboration between multiple agencies, and it's a great example of how trying to use the existing infrastructure to advance a pilot for improving transit through the area to try and get them more efficient and to utilize the space that we already have. So I also wanted to add that statewide, this project has quite a bit of interest in other areas to see how they could potentially implement a similar type project. So with that, I'd like to introduce Peter Thompson, the project manager on the project.
Thanks, Karen. Good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. Peter Thompson's my name. I'm a Senior Transportation Technology Analyst in the Systems Engineering Group in the Division of Engineering and Construction. This morning, I'm going to be providing the Transportation Committee with an informational update on the Interstate 805 State Route 94 part-time transit-only lanes pilot. This pilot was last presented to the Transportation Committee in January 18th of 2019, and then again yearly as part of the transit program updates. The pilot began in June 21st this year, and we're now coming close to the 90-day evaluation period of the safety phase of the project, with a transition into full corridor operations expected by mid-October. This Federal Transit Administration funded pilot is a collaboration between Sandag, Caltrans, the Metropolitan Transit System, the cities of Chula Vista, a national city, with oversight provided by the California Highway Patrol. The multi-stakeholder collaboration on the pilot is aiming to fully evaluate the sustainable operations that were envisaged by these concepts in the 2021 regional plan on the path to, as Karen said, informing existing statewide guidance. Briefly, the pilot is seeking to better understand whether we can improve the reliability of the South Bay Rapid 225 service by using existing infrastructure to pass rush hour traffic. And we're certainly seeking to understand whether those benefits outweigh the costs. Thirdly, we're trying to understand whether the maturity that we've installed onto the vehicles themselves and into the roadway is sustainable in terms of the operations and maintenance costs. And much to Director Gallardo's discussion and response with the public on the last item, this is being considered as, you know, a mitigation. These are not full speed lanes. I'll talk about that in a second. And lastly, we're seeking to understand whether the Federal Communication Commission's designated transportation safety spectrum, or more commonly known as vehicle to infrastructure technology, is able to reliably deliver the promise for safer roads. Safe operations have been at the core of of every decision made by the Pilot Steering Committee. That steering committee has been guided by directors at Caltrans, the Metropolitan Transit System, and again with oversight provided by the California Highway Patrol. The pilot has procured 17 vehicles dedicated to the South Bay Rapid service. Those vehicles have been outfitted with a transit-specific driver assistance system. The system and the sensors that are part of that technology on the vehicle scan the road around the vehicle and assist the driver through warnings and alerts. The vehicles are also outfitted with specific transportation-specific wireless radios, enabling an approaching bus to communicate with the ramp meter. And by using this technology, vehicle to infrastructure technology, we can do so without the risk of the radio being interfered with. When the bus is operating in the part-time transit-only lanes, all other requirements are satisfied. Drivers are held at the ramp stop bar with newly installed dynamic signs informing them that a bus is merging. Lastly, the pilot vehicles are operated by a dedicated pool of 60 professional drivers. All the drivers have completed classroom and road certification training. They're, with CHP's oversight, the operators are trained to only operate in the part-time transit-only lanes under the following conditions: only during peak hours, only when the freeway is operating below 35 miles an hour, never during inclement weather, never faster than 35 miles an hour, never more than 15 miles an hour over the speed of the adjacent general purpose lane, and operators are always taught to yield to emergency response vehicles, enforcement and maintenance vehicles, disabled vehicles, and large debris. So the corridor, while the Rapid Service 225 operates from the Otay Mesa Transit Center adjacent to the international border, all the way through the city of Chula Vista and National City, and ultimately through to downtown via the 94, we are only operating on a 7-mile portion of that corridor. In the morning commute, the boundary extends from Plaza Boulevard on the Interstate 805, and there we're using an outside shoulder part-time transit-only lane. The vehicles then transition to a dedicated lane on the 94 connector, the Interstate 805 northbound to the 94 connector. And then on the State Route 94, a dedicated lane is available on the inside shoulder all the way into downtown. Then in the evening, the pilot vehicles and drivers are again able to use the part-time transit-only lanes located in the outside shoulder of the connector between State Route 94 eastbound and Interstate 805 southbound. Through the months of November, January, and June, the pilot has continued to raise public awareness of its operations. We had billboards installed along the 805. We've run multiple bilingual radio spots. We have continued through to provide digital marketing and geo-fenced ways alerts. We ran media availability in mid or early June and had robust media engagement. And since that time, we've continued to push information out through Sandag's e-newsletters. So bus on shoulders are already in broad-scale use in the great states of Minnesota, Washington, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, North Carolina, and Kansas. So therefore, at its 3-year conclusion, the pilot will deliver a local assessment aimed at informing existing statewide guidance under the broad evaluation categories seen on this slide. To date, the pilot vehicles have made use of the part-time transit-only lanes a total of 365 times, which equates to about 14% of total trips. Once we have transitioned into full corridor operations, I'd be happy to bring future items to the committee to explore how this transition is translating into trip reliability for MTS customers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation. We will go to public comment.
Thank you. We do have one in-person public comment speaker split, but I think the person had to leave. Randy Van Vleck or Torres Van Vleck?
Yeah, he has departed.
So no, we don't have any public comments on this item then.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Job well done, Mr. Thompson. Any comments or questions from the committee members? Yes, Mr.
Real
Sankey.
quick, I'm so excited about the use of technology in this. We've talked around this table for the 7 years I've been in and out of here about cars talking to other cars, cars talking to streetlights. Here we have a bus talking to a merging light. It's very exciting. It's a project that, as an MTS board member, I'm thrilled about. On-time reliability is a huge part of moving people around, and this assists us in that. And the fact that there's been 0 accidents is very encouraging. But I would argue that at some point there's going to be one, but let's not let that trip us up. Let's make sure we stay on task and get this project as neat and clean and tidy as we can. Thank you for your hard work, Peter and team.
Very good. Any other comments? Seeing none, the slide where we had the very happy driver is what I love to see with our employees, because this technology takes a lot of the stress off of driving those buses. So thank you very much for all the efforts on this. And that concludes our agenda today. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 7th, 2022 at 9 a.m. Lastly, I would like to wish our Mexican family members and neighbors a happy Independence Day. Un feliz día de independencia. Thank you all. We are adjourned.